Canduel, soy recientemente nombrado el representante del Banco Interamericano de Desarrollo aquí en Uruguay. Ante todo, quisiera agradecer la oportunidad de poder contar con este espacio para poder presentar y servir de moderador al señor expresidente de Estonia, Toomas Ilves, a quien también quisiera agradecer por haber aceptado nuestra invitación para participar en este evento celebratorio de los 10 años de Agesic. Desde Agesic y también del BID hemos considerado pertinente contar con la presencia del expresidente Ives, ya que la experiencia de su país bajo su liderazgo fue extraordinariamente exitosa y pionera en la transformación digital. Hoy Estonia es un referente mundial en gobierno digital y el uso de TICs como motor de su crecimiento. Como ustedes sabrán, en 1991, tras la independencia de la antigua Unión Soviética, Estonia se encontró en una situación de muy limitados recursos financieros que llevó al gobierno a buscar soluciones que le permitieran atender a las necesidades de sus ciudadanos de manera eficiente, efectiva y transparente. Así, el país comenzó un proceso planificado y continuo de desarrollo digital que a lo largo de 20 años lo ha posicionado a la vanguardia de la agenda digital mundial. Nos parece una historia de éxito realmente extraordinario, muy relevante para el Uruguay y para otros países de la región, de los cuales hay varios aquí representados el día de hoy. Las tecnologías de información y comunicación, como se ha discutido de una forma elocuente esta mañana, son cada vez más el eje principal de la competitividad y la mejora en la provisión de servicios a los ciudadanos. El acceso a estas tecnologías de manera equitativa en el territorio, así como su adopción en toda la economía y el gobierno, son fundamentales para cerrar las brechas entre esta región y el Uruguay con el resto del mundo. Nosotros en el BID hemos sido un socio cercano para los países de la región, incluyendo muy destacadamente a Uruguay en el desarrollo digital e ingreso en la sociedad de conocimiento, tratando de proveer experiencia técnica a los países para que puedan a su vez construir e implementar sus propias agendas digitales. Nos enorgullece mucho haber sido socio de Agesic desde el comienzo de este proceso transformacional que se ha trazado en estos últimos 10 años. Y estamos realmente muy contentos de estar aquí el día de hoy y celebrar este hito con todos ustedes. En muchos frentes, lo comentó Miguel Brechner esta mañana, que aspiraba a que Uruguay sea Estonia en el futuro. Y me llamó poderosamente la atención esa visión. Nosotros compartimos eso de alguna forma y también destacaría que ya Uruguay de alguna forma es la Estonia de América Latina. Ahora sí, digamos, para poder estar a nivel mundial, quizás hay todavía un trabajo adelante, pero en muchas de las métricas que son relevantes para este trabajo, para este tema, a lo largo y ancho de la región, Uruguay está de líder. Se ha destacado esta mañana, pero yo quería reafirmar eso. De alguna forma Uruguay juega el rol de Estonia de América Latina, ojalá y pueda jugarlo a nivel mundial, para, digamos, complementar y profundizar su transformación digital y cumplir con las metas que como sociedad se han establecido, que han sido en gran medida liderados por las agencias cuyos líderes han estado aquí esta mañana. Qué panel extraordinario que tuvimos el placer de presenciar esta mañana. Ahora sí, a la presentación, no hablo más. El Toomas Hendrik Ives es un político y diplomático estonio. Fue presidente de la República de Estonia por 10 años, de 2006 hasta octubre de 2016. Previamente había sido embajador en Estados Unidos, un ministro de Asuntos Exteriores y miembro del Parlamento Europeo. Tiene una licencia en psicología en la Universidad de Columbia y también una maestría en la Universidad de Pensilvania, pero quizás más que la experiencia docente, digamos, que ha tenido, que también es larga, yo destacaría que ha sido, durante su presidencia, él realmente logró transformar a Estonia en esta referencia mundial. aparte de eso, a nivel de toda Europa ha tenido una serie de posiciones como líder del grupo de trabajo para e-health, o sea, en temas sanitarios, también director por temas en la nube de toda la Unión Europea, y más recientemente dirigió la preparación del informe de desarrollo mundial del Banco Mundial de 2016, que trata precisamente sobre dividendos digitales, que es el tema que nos convoca el día de hoy. Es un informe muy relevante, al cual, para lo que se está hablando hoy, se los recomiendo como lectura importante. Desde noviembre de 2016, el presidente Ives ha copresidido el Consejo Mundial de Futuros sobre Blockchain Technology, algo que ha sido fundamental en la experiencia de Estonia, que fue un grupo creado por el Foro Económico Mundial. Recientemente fue galardonado con el Bertelsmann Award para visionario digital, el MON, el reconocimiento MON, y aparte es un autor prolífico y políglota, ha escrito libros creo que en 6 idiomas, realmente es una persona tremendamente culta, y espero que pueda, ayer sobre un almuerzo en el mercado del puerto, comiendo una picaña, empezó a compartir unas perlas de sabiduría, y realmente espero que ustedes tengan esa misma impresión. Sin más, le presento al presidente Ives. Muchas gracias.
Damas y caballeros, buenos días. Es un gran honor estar invitado aquí para hablar sobre la digitalización en mi país y sobre las lecciones que nosotros hemos aprendido en los últimos 25 años. Pero tengo un problema. Hace 45 años que no he estudiado español y por eso hablaré en inglés. Pero yo he escrito aquí, recuerdo un poquito, pero en inglés. Uruguay and Estonia, having studied a little bit about Uruguay, actually share a number of features, not just digitalization, but but a good deal more than that. But I think maybe the underlying motivations tend to be similar. We have small populations, but our territories relative to the population are fairly large, so we have low population densities. Our GDP per capita fairly similar. That is that we do well, but we'd like to do it better. And of course, we are both bordered by giants. Fortunately, you have a nice giant next to you. More importantly, we are considered to be leaders in digitization. You in Latin America, we in Europe. And moreover, interestingly, good little countries that we have almost identically low levels of corruption according to Transparency International. So I feel we have a lot in common. We each took our own paths to get to where we are. Let me describe today our path and our thinking during the past 2.5 decades. For us, we had a somewhat more difficult history. After Soviet, Nazi, and again Soviet occupations that lasted from 1940 to 1991, Estonia finally reestablished the independence it had enjoyed before World War II. That was 26 years ago. The problem was everything that we had lost in the 50 years of lack of development. After the reestablishment of Estonia, of our independence, we were extremely poor. If before World War II, Estonia and our neighbor Finland had the same GDP per capita, then in 1991, Finland's GDP per capita was 13 times higher than ours. So catching up seemed impossible. It was Zeno's paradox. You just can never catch up because they're always getting ahead of you. Yet I realized already then there was one area, digitization, where Estonia, as poor as it was on a level playing field, even if other countries had, in the meantime, developed tremendously. Because after all, the first web browser, Mosaic, only came out in 1993. So I thought back then that while catching up in other areas, building road infrastructure and public health systems and so forth, would take a long time, in digitization, Estonia was starting at the same place with everyone else. So why not try? So the first step, which you have also done, is that was to get all our schools online, which we did, so to the point that by 1997-98, all Estonian schools were equipped with computer labs and were connected, which also then served as computer centers after school hours in especially rural communities. And later on, together with a public-private partnership with banks, we established a program to teach older and other rural residents how to use computers. But the really significant step that pushed us on our way, and this is where we again have much in common with Uruguay, was to establish in 2001 chip-based national identities, which moreover had legal efficacy. That means they had legal force. It's not an ID card that is important, though for security reasons you do need a chip ID. But what is important is that a digital signature is equivalent to a physical, or as they call it, a wet signature. So that what we did was to create for all citizens a legal digital identity. To get the benefits of digitization, you need to give this digital identity a legal status. That is, to make a legal signature equivalent to a physical signature. All transactions requiring a physical signature must be possible with a digital signature. In Estonia, we have 3 transactions that you have to do physically. All the rest are digital. The 3 are physical property transfer, and second is getting married, and third is getting divorced. Given my history, I wouldn't mind the second, but the third is kind of difficult because you have to get together. But everything else we can do digitally. But in order to do this, what you have to do is you have to tie your digital identity, which exists, to the national registry to give it legal force. Just like with a passport, your passport must be tied to the national registry. And this, for example, is a crucial step that most of Europe and the United States and Canada and the UK and Australia, New Zealand, Japan have not yet taken. If you take this step, however, that is the first step to creating a digital society where you can do all of those legal things that you need to do or that you do otherwise in the physical world. A second prerequisite, again, this is not a law, but something we simply have discovered, is that these identities must be mandatory and universal. Why so? Well, it's simple. If the digital identity card is not universal, digital services, be they public or private, will not be developed. In countries where digital identities exist but are not mandatory, today in Europe, all countries must offer a digital identity card. The problem is that neither the public nor the private sector will make the efforts to develop and invest in these services unless they are universal. In most European Union countries where there is no mandatory card, e-identity uptake is about 25%. Those are the early adopters, the people who bought PCs and Macs back 30 years ago. But the rest of society doesn't bother. But look at it from the point of view of a government ministry or a general public sector service or the private sector. If you look at the public and you see that only 20% have electronic IDs, you're not going to bother developing services that will only appeal to that portion of the population, because 80% or 85% are still using paper. So this is the one brutal step that needs to be taken in order to really digitize a society, I would say, is you make it a mandatory thing. The spectacular uptake rates that we have in Estonia for digital services, for say tax returns or digital prescriptions, where the doctor just puts your prescriptions online and you go and you put in your card and your code and you take it out of the pharmacy, which is around 98 to 99% and has been almost from the onset of these programs. These are precisely the result of a universally available service that citizens want to use because it is far more convenient than the old paper methods. The hundreds of millions of legal transactions, of course even a prescription is a legal transaction, as is any bank transfer. The hundreds of millions that we have every year in Estonia are all made possible because of this, because people all have the ID card. So that is one of the key steps that we have found you need to take. A second issue that we tackled right off was with our ID is that all transactions are based on two-factor authentication. Now here it's getting a little technical, but most of you will understand. Using a highly encrypted public key infrastructure, or PKI, encrypted at RSA 2048. That's for the geeks in the audience, but it's pretty good, and it's not been cracked yet. This is absolutely vital to have encryption and PKI for two reasons. One is for security, because we have not been hacked yet, even though everyone else has been. And secondly, to increase trust in the system, because again, trust is that ineffable, sort of indescribable moment or feeling that if you don't have the feeling of trust in the system, people will stick to paper, even though I would argue paper is less trustworthy than digital transactions, but people won't use it unless they have trust. And in order to have trust, you need to make sure people know that the system is unhackable at this point and it's encrypted. But the legal signature is not enough. You also need a secure architecture. And here, well, we have adopted what, looking back now, we realize is an extremely secure architecture. But it came out of being too poor to do anything different. That is, in our relative poverty in the 1990s, we didn't have enough money to build big servers or big data centers. And being poor, then we figured, well, what are we going to do? Everyone's digitizing, but we don't have the money to build big data centers. So but we did have is that every ministry, every agency, everyone had their own server. So what we developed through some very smart IT people that we had, something which is a digital data exchange layer. We call it X-Road, that connects all servers through the ID system, authenticated. Each transaction is authenticated. It is an open source, non-proprietary platform that Estonia has for 15 years already given away to countries who are interested in their own data exchange layer. Mexico has basically copied our system. Panama has taken it over. We gave it to the Palestinian Authority and to Moldova, but the Palestinian Authority didn't really go far with it. Moldova has used this system or this platform. Together with our neighbor Finland, we are actually now, because it's open source, not proprietary, we are developing version 7.0 together to make our services even more trans-border, transnational. And certainly at this point already, we do have cross-border taxation. It's especially VAT, and also for cross-border digital prescriptions, which means that if a Finn gets sick in Estonia, he can get his Finnish medicine by calling his doctor or writing his doctor and taking the prescription out in Finland. Now, I'm not going to go into the technical details. I do have video here, which I will present to you in about 5 seconds. El video, por favor. This explains how it works.
Running a modern state is a data-centered endeavor. Ensuring the functioning of the state requires administering very large quantities of data. Estonia lacks a centralized or master database. Data is stored where it is created. Each agency administers its own data separately, and data is not duplicated. At the same time, state authorities and agencies need data outside their purviews in order to function. For example, the police constantly require information from the population register. Likewise, the unemployment insurance fund depends on information from the health information system. How can authorities securely exchange important data? First, the data must be easily accessible by the authorities that are authorized to use it. Second, the integrity of the data must be maintained. No third party should be able to make any changes to the data while it is in transit. Third, the data must remain confidential during its journey. It must be protected from the eyes of unauthorized parties. The X-Road is a data exchange platform that fulfills all three of these requirements. The X-Road makes life simpler for both the state and the citizens. For example, when a child is born, information about the birth is sent directly from the hospital to the population register. From there, it is sent automatically to the health insurance fund so that the child will have health insurance and a family physician. This prevents the creation of excessive paperwork and saves time. The state functions in the background. The X-Road helps authorities make work processes more convenient. Many activities can be automated, which frees employees to deal with matters that require human involvement. Authorities also don't have to worry about the authenticity of data. They can be confident that data received from the tax board definitely originated from the actual tax board. Additionally, the X-Road can be used regardless of what technology an authority uses. For the state, the X-Road, above all, makes it possible for authorities to efficiently exchange data among themselves. Sensitive information moves securely, and the system itself is so resilient that it cannot be easily brought down by those with malicious intentions. Since the birth of X-Road in 2001, the system has operated continuously without interruption. The X-Road helps the state see the big picture of how different authorities are connected to one another. In addition, the X-Road makes it possible to exchange data not only within the country, but also across national borders. That is, of course, if databases and information systems are working properly. The biggest beneficiaries of the X-Road are, of course, the citizens. They enjoy the benefits of a better functioning state and save all of the time they would otherwise spend submitting papers and forms. How much time? During the time it took you to watch this animation, the X-Road saved around 240 working hours in Estonia. Cool.
Gracias. Well, that was supposed to be the commercial break. But one of the things that isn't in here, but which citizens really love as a result of this architecture, is a regulation that we have that we are trying to push through in the European Union, but I don't know if we can do it. But in any case, we call it the once-only rule, which is that if you think about it, if you have an identity, and you know who everyone is, who is who, and you have this system that works autonomously in connecting data, you don't ever have to ask for the same data twice. So we actually forbid it. You never have to. I never have to write my address anywhere because they already have the address. I don't have to get a form with my health records or my tax records. It's all there. And what that means is that is conceptually that bureaucracy has changed from being a serial process into a parallel process. Ever since bureaucracy was invented, when you had papyrus or you had clay tablets with cuneiform, you had it go from one office to another office to a third office. That's a serial process. This is parallel. It goes to all relevant authorities. So one example is setting up a company. If you want to set up a company, everywhere you have to do the same things. I mean, you have to provide who's on the board, what your assets are. Well, when you see who is on the board, then the government has to check that, well, none of the board members have committed a crime, all the board members have paid their taxes, they've paid their alimony, at least in my country, this is a big thing, you know, all these things have to be done. Now, in a serial process, it goes from one ministry to one agency to another agency, and everyone puts their stamp on it. In Estonia, it goes out at once. It's a parallel process. And the result is that there are countries in Europe where it takes a year to set up a company. In Estonia, it takes 15 minutes to set up a company because all of that bureaucracy is done automatically, it is done in parallel, and all the checks are done within a very short time, and if you've done all the right things and you haven't done anything wrong, then you get to set up your company. So that's more or less the good side of everything. But there are also things that we have to worry about, and we do worry about. Most of you probably know that the first country to experience a genuinely politically motivated cyber attack was Estonia, 2007, 10 years ago. They never got in. It was a DDoS, distributed denial of service attack, but it did shut down the country. And so since that time, we have been obsessed, if you might use that word, with digital security. In fact, both the NATO Center for Excellence in Cyber Security is based in Tallinn, as is the EU Center for the Security of the visa system for the European Union, precisely because of the work we have done on cybersecurity. And this is a fundamental issue that we all have to face as we become more and more digital. As we become more digital, our country's databases more increasingly exist only in digital form, and where the public sector and the private sector rely on the security of the data and the integrity of data that doesn't exist anymore in paper. It's only there in ones and zeros. And this is another long transformation. In the old days, back in the very old days, you would take a long time to make a very uninformative message by chiseling it into a rock. And you couldn't carry the rock very far. The history of information storage has gone from little information, difficult to transport, but permanent, to information that is, you can store vast amounts of information almost instantaneously. You can transfer it everywhere, but it is impermanent, and it can easily be corrupted, it can be stolen, it can be changed, or it can be erased. And so one of the most important aspects that we need to deal with in societies such as yours and ours is the issue of data integrity. Now, in cybersecurity, as you probably know, most people have been obsessing for years about privacy, especially since Mr. Snowden came out with his revelations. But privacy, I mean, as much as it bothers or offends people that it could be violated, it's really, I think, peanuts, a small matter compared to the data integrity. I may not like it if someone publishes my emails, or if they publish my blood type, or if they publish my bank balance. It's not pleasant to have your privacy violated. But if someone changes my correspondence, and this recently happened, by the way, when during the French election, where the correspondence or emails of Emmanuel Macron before the French elections were published, and it turned out that they were fake correspondence there. Or someone changes my blood type. This could mean my life. If someone changes the record of my blood type, and I get a transfusion based on a wrong blood type, or if someone changes your bank account. I mean, unless they increase your bank account, but that usually doesn't happen. So these are data integrity issues, and more we will face the issue of data integrity as we become more and more digital. So what we've done in my country is that primary and vital data have all been put on blockchain. So healthcare records or anything related to healthcare prescriptions, property registers. We have this bad experience with the Soviet occupation, so we know that you better have good records of your property. Interestingly enough, court cases, because our court system now is completely digitized. And one day we realized that what happens if someone changes, I mean, we have sort of, continental law based on what, previous cases. What happens if someone goes into the court system and changes the results of a court case? So what we have done is put all of those things on blockchain, which it's odd terminology. It's a private blockchain. It's not open to everyone, but it basically, any changes require affirmation or confirmation by the stakeholders in the system. So that's one thing that we all need to think about. The other thing we need to think about, especially if you're a small country, is the security in general of our data, whatever bases that we have, not changing them, but having them destroyed. Japan, after the Fukushima tsunami followed by the reactor, lost about 5% of its national data. Now, we're a small country with, as I've mentioned, less than a wonderful history when it comes to our neighbors invading us. And so, based on our geopolitical location, we have instituted the idea of data embassies. That means all of our national data is copied to servers that are located outside of the country. But if you just have a server outside the country, who knows? The NSA could go in there and do it, or the GRU or the FSB or any of these people. But in fact, what we've done, and this is again complex, is we are applying the Vienna Convention on diplomatic immunity. We actually have sought and received extraterritoriality for servers. So embassies enjoy extraterritoriality. I mean, no one can enter the Uruguayan embassy in Washington because, that's what the Vienna Convention says. We have the same thing for servers. And so no one can go in there even physically, let alone they can't hack it. And again, this is something that I would advise small countries to take up. I would especially advise that to small countries living in seismically active areas, think countries like Greece, for example. But in general, we need to think about as more and more of our lives exist only in ones and zeros, we need to make sure that those ones and zeros are secure. And one last thing in terms of our policies that we just saw recently that was made a lot of sense, which is we have very strong prohibition of using old software. This should be a no-brainer after the WannaCry ransomware attack several months ago, which took down the United Kingdom's National Health Service because they were using old software. You must keep your software always up to date, and we have a requirement in the government that you can't have old software. You shouldn't also have old hardware. But there's a fundamental issue that both the private sector and the public sector need to realize is that IT, in the digital era, these things are not capital expenditures. It is not like buying a car and you say, okay, I bought a car. I don't need a new car, to buy a new car for another 5 years. No, I mean, that's how most people think about IT. They think of it as a CapEx. It's not a CapEx, it's an OpEx. That's an operating expense. And you must, at all times, have the most recent software updated, or if there are new versions, update that. If you need it to be patched. Now this means a bigger hole in your budget. This means that when you plan your budget, it's not like I bought Windows XP in 2003 and I don't need to buy anything until 2020. No, you need to budget for this as a digital society. And that's a fundamental change that also applies to the private sector. If you don't invest in keeping up with the latest, then if you don't constantly update and patch your software, you will put your citizens' data at risk, you will put your profits at risk. So anyway, more generally, the rapid digitization of the world economy has already changed these economies, and it will in the future change even further power and economic relationships. We've already seen that size matters less than it did in the old days. Countries can be smaller and can be far ahead of countries that are larger. You can have far greater digital capability. In fact, if you're highly digitized, you are far more you function at a higher level of, say, population equivalence, because you don't have people doing the stuff that the other bigger guys have people doing, you have machines doing them. So small countries like mine can emerge from, as we have, relative obscurity to become a leader. One-time leaders can fall dismally behind in adopting the protective, or it can fall abysmally behind by not only by not developing, but as we have seen the case in many cases across the globe, opting for protectionism because we in Europe, we don't have that many, we have so few cloud services, let's keep the Americans out. Of course, protectionism, I would say, never really works. But in the digital era of Moore's law, where progress is exponential, not linear, then if you adopt a protectionist approach in IT, you are guaranteed to fall behind and suffer the consequences. Of course, if you're not a liberal democracy, but an authoritarian society, none of this really matters. But in the case of liberal democracies, as Uruguay is, there you do have to think about avoiding populist protectionist measures, especially in IT. All of this comes down to kind of a basic lesson, which I drone on and on about, that none of this is a matter of technology itself. Technology in this world is ubiquitous, and the fruits of technology are ubiquitous. They are everywhere. Routers, 3D printers, self-driving cars. Anyone can have these if you have the right policies, laws, and regulations. My own country, despite its 2 minutes? Okay, I have to speed up. Well, basically, I'll say that when it comes down to its policy, laws, and regulations, we are a digital powerhouse in the European Union because we have the laws and we have the policies and we have the regulations, and other countries don't have the political courage, they don't want to have a digital identity, they don't want to adopt regulations or laws that will allow them to do the things we do. And I mean, ultimately it hurts us as much, because I'd like to see these services that we offer to be extended across Europe, but it's it really is a matter of the analog side of society, the people who make the laws. What separates those who benefit and those who pull ahead in the world, separates them from those who fall behind, is a matter of your laws, your legal systems, not what kind of, how many servers you have. And if you don't create the legal framework, you won't get ahead. Uruguay knows this. You have it. You've done it. But that's also something for the rest of Latin America, is that where countries don't want to adopt the laws and the policies, the technology will not follow. So that what we need to do, however, is that no country, especially a small country, is an island. So it's in our interest to make sure that other countries also adopt policies so we can be compatible. One example we have that, this is on the one hand it's wonderful and it's unique, on the other hand it's sad that it's wonderful and sad that it's unique, is our digital signature, digital prescription, which we have with Finland. We get 8 million Finns visiting us a year. That's a lot of Finns. And they also come for a good time, so they tend to lose their medicine because they're having a good time. Well, what we have now is that if you lose your medicine in Finland, you can write to your doctor in Finland, or you can call them up, and you say, I lost my thing. Could you please give me a new prescription? And he'll put it into the computer, and you can go to an Estonian pharmacy, stick in your card, take it out to get the medicine. You actually pay what you pay for in Finland. It's technologically a no-brainer. It would take half a day to set that system up. It took us 5 years to get there. The sad thing is it took it 5 years. The sadder thing is that this doesn't exist anywhere else. So what you need to do, or my vision of where we should be going, both in the European Union, but I think also in Latin America, where you have the distinct advantage of two common languages, but most of Latin America speaks Spanish. You don't have the problem that we have Estonians and Latvians and Finns and Swedes and Danes and Norwegians, all with different languages. You have Espanol. It should be easier for you to do these things, and it should be in your interest to make sure that the services will operate across borders. Again, when I think in European context, not only do I want to be able to get my medicine if I get sick in Greece, I would want my medical record if I get sick in Greece to appear on the computer screen of the doctor in Greece, already translated into Greek. That's not possible right now. You can get your medical record in Estonia translated into English automatically because it's not a no-brainer either, but it only works in Estonia. This is the direction we should be moving in, not only making our own countries be more digital, but making sure that our neighbors do so as well. I, in fact, have proposed to the European Union where we have a single market, which based on so-called 4 freedoms, the free movement of people, capital, goods, and non-digital services, that we actually have a 5th freedom, the free movement of data, the free movement of digital services, which is something that unfortunately is a long way off, but right now Estonia, holding the presidency of the European Union, is pushing it as hard as we can, and we hope we can get some progress on the laws underlying European data transfers, at least within the European Union. I don't see that it should be any different in Latin America. I think that for Mercosur, this is kind of a no-brainer of an idea to advance because, in fact, you may have problems with your trade relations and tariffs with maybe some of your neighbors, but there really shouldn't be a problem with transferring data so that if you go to Buenos Aires and you get sick, you can get your medicine from your Montevideo doctor. But I don't know. I can't do any of that. I have a hard enough time trying to convince the European Union to do what they should do. But in closing, In Estonia, we tend to be rather proud, as you can tell from my talk, of what we have done coming from the dire poverty of a post-Soviet backwater a quarter century ago. And I'm proud that we're number one in cybersecurity in Europe, and we're number one in internet freedom at the same time, and that in the world, according to Freedom House, which proves that you don't have to give up cybersecurity for freedom, or you don't have to give up cyber or internet freedom to get cybersecurity. But the bottom line in all of this, I'll say one more time, if you haven't gotten the point, is that even those accomplishments which come from our policies, laws, and even those policies come from our policies, laws, and regulations. Success in the digital world is an analog issue, an issue not of software and hardware, but an issue of whether the men and women who govern, who are elected, who make up civil society and promote the country's developments, make the right decisions and opt for a digital future. Let us all try. Thank you.
So we have just very little time for perhaps one or even two questions from the audience. We're running a little bit behind. I think I'll take advantage of the fact that I'm the moderator. I'll say it in Spanish first and then I'll...
Por favor.
La historia que acabas de contar fue extraordinariamente interesante, cómo Estonia logró acelerar su crecimiento y realmente pasar a otro nivel. Recomienda dos cosas que puede hacer Uruguay para seguir un poco su propio camino, pero yendo hacia poder competir en las, digamos, a nivel mundial en estos temas. So, recommend two things.
Well, I mean, you're along the way, further along than anyone else. So, in a sense, I mean, the legal signature is probably the most important thing. And as I understand, your digital identity card you've distributed to I mean, 1/3 of the population actually has the chip card. Is that right? Yes?
A little more, no?
But in any case, if you have those and you have the right architecture, then you can develop the services. When it comes to services, my recommendation to everybody is concentrate on services that citizens like. I mean, who loves digitization? The tax authority, right? I mean, we get more money, you know. Well, that's nice, but what you want to do is you want to concentrate on things that your citizens like, not your tax board. To the tax board, I say, do everything possible to make it easy to pay taxes. So it's a simple process. But then focus on things that people want. That's why I keep mentioning digital signatures, digital prescriptions, because it's the single most popular thing that we have done, because it saves people so much effort, so much time. And the older you get, the more you appreciate it, because you don't have to go, especially if you live in my climate, you know, you go out to get medicine, it's kind of ugly. So, I mean, I would say focus on citizens and really make sure your laws make sense and allow you to do things.
Okay. Is there one person from the audience who would like to ask a question? You raised your hand first. ¿Alguien tiene un micrófono que le pueda? Ahí está. I'll translate for you.
No,
Oh, you got that. Okay.
Hello. Thank you very much for your speech. I actually work for Uruguay 21, the Trade and Investment Promotion Agency. And I've read a little bit about Estonia and all the developments you've made in terms of IT and the government and the legal framework. And now I wanted to move a little bit to the industry and ask you to go deeply into the impact of all these reforms in the exports of services in the country.
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, we do have, it gets very hard with digital. I mean, you may know that Skype was invented in Estonia. Or maybe you didn't know. But anyway, Skype was invented in Estonia. And as so often happens in IT, Is it Estonian anymore? I don't know. Right now in Europe and in America, there's a financial transfer service called TransferWise, which is our second unicorn, 2 billion euros, invented by two Estonians living in London who were so annoyed that they had to pay such high bank transfers. They were working for Skype in London. They had to pay so much to transfer money back home, they decided there's got to be a better way. And so they came up with this company called TransferWise, and now it's worth 2 billion. Now, are they Estonian? Well, most of the intellectual work is done in Estonia. The engineers are in Estonian. They're in London, but not for long because of Brexit. Do you need to live, what does it mean anymore in this? So what is export? Who's the export here? And that's one reason why we, in fact, created something I didn't talk about here, but the e-residency program, because it's so beneficial for countries outside the European Union to be established inside the European Union. But there's no law that says you have to physically be there, but you can establish your company in European Union if you establish e-residency in Estonia. And then you open a bank account. You do all the things that you do to establish a business, but you don't have to be there physically. Again, I see the world in that sense is moving along that, what's export in that point? I don't know. It does, however, because you pay taxes, if you establish a business in Estonia and you do whatever you do pay taxes in Estonia, so we don't mind.
I think that's all the time we have, President. Qué lástima, ¿no? Habría mucho más que hablar, sin duda, pero agradeciendo otra vez a los organizadores, al director Krastonek y a todos ustedes por acompañarnos. Muchas gracias.